Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. There's a few of us here today, mainly behind the scenes to answer any questions that you might have throughout the evening. But thank you very much. So I'm Amanda Van Santen. I work in the training department. Also with me is Rachel, Vaughan, and Robbie. Hiding in the background is also Kirsty as well, who's part of our recognition team. So I'm going to turn my camera off and I'm going to get going with the presentation. I just wanted to say a massive thank you for joining us this evening. Today we're mainly going to look at the preparation for an inspection, a couple of updates and why we're running today, and also the resources available to you. As I've said, I've got Rachel and Vaughan with me from the training department, and I've also got Robbie Bell, RDO for the Eastern region, as well as Kirsty from recognition. So just a massive thank you for joining us. And we're really pleased how many have joined us over the last two updates. Actually, it's fantastic, so thank you. So we have had a bit of a change in staff, but otherwise things are fairly normal. So if you do have a question when you're going in to do an inspection and you're wondering who the best person is to speak to, if you're a UK centre, remember you've got your RDOs there for the small boat side of things, so dinghy, windsurfing and power. If it's something to do with the main recognition areas, then you can contact Recognition Direct, and we've got both Michelle and Kirsty there to help you. If it's something that's more specific, it's to do with the scheme itself, it might be that one of the chief instructors or the scheme administrators are the people that are best to help you, so direct your questions direct to them. In a similar manner, if you are going to an overseas centre and you've got some questions from an overseas centre or they don't know who to contact, there are no RDOs, so it's direct to RYA recognition or to the scheme staff specifically, depending on that question might be. And I just wanted to take the opportunity just to refresh who those people are, because we've had a couple of changes in personnel. So with me in the top left is Molly, so she helps with the dinghy, multi-hull, keelboat and windsurfing scheme. Chloe has moved to power, so she helps Rachel with the power schemes, inland waterways and PW, so she's top right. I'm getting my lefts and rights mixed up here. Just below Molly is Kirsty. She joined this I feel a bit sorry for her. Kirsty joined us during lockdown. I don't know how many days she's actually physically spent in the office, but they're probably not very many. So it's been a bit of a strange introduction for Kirsty, but she joins Michelle in recognition and inspections. And then along the bottom, we've got Rachel, Vaughan and myself here to help you. I think one of the biggest things, and probably you've heard me say this on many occasions, but just in the time I've been at the RYA, the difference our inspections have made to our centres is huge. And that's mainly due to you guys and the way that you've changed the manner in which you approach the inspection and the way that you talk to the principals and the chief instructors of the centres, and the manner in which you go in and do the inspection. I think we were in a realm where we perhaps were seen as carrying around clipboards and ticking boxes and perhaps assessing a centre rather than actually being there to help them and provide information and actually a friend to ask questions. And that feedback comes through, and I think we've gone from a stage where people didn't want to have their inspection to actually centres wondering when their inspection is going to take place and actually really benefiting from somebody external coming in and taking a look and giving advice and being able to share the expertise that you've got. So huge thank you, and please carry on in that way. And I think situations like we're in now and what our centres have been through, and you guys as well in the last 12 months, I think that approach is going to be even more necessary as we help centres recoup and regenerate their centres and get activity going again. A lot of today is happening because of a fatality that happened in 2019. It was a keelboat fatality. It was a terrible incident. if you do want to find out more information about it, and it's probably worth reading about if you are going into small boat centres, the MAIB safety bulletin and also the full report is now available on the MAIB website. Some workshops were delivered at the Sailability Conference in 2020 and also at the training conference in the same year, and we're continuing that work. There were some quite fundamental lessons learned to be taken away from it, which the RYA and the MAIB have worked together to push out that information, as have RF as well. Some of those actions have led us to update some of our material which are with regards or which are to do with inspections. We've reviewed some documentation including IR1 and also some of the guides that we had available for our training centres. So the guide to risk assessment and the guide to writing standard operating procedures have both been reviewed based on feedback we received, and we started to investigate after that incident to try and make them more user-friendly documents that a centre can actually read as a step-by-step guide to help ensure that their safety management is robust. And I suppose that's where we come in as an inspector to check that that documentation has been done correctly and is robust and is fit for purpose and actually reflects what that centre is doing. And I know that when we read the action plans, the administrative side of it, the safety management documentation often comes up as an area that needs further work. So take a look at those guides and just reflect that back into your inspection, ensure that they do have robust systems in place that cover all the areas that need to. In addition to that, we've changed IR1 slightly, and I'll just come into that in a minute on a slide that I've got for you. Sailability are also working really hard to see how they could support their centres better, especially those that aren't recognised training centres, mainly in the same areas around the realms of safety management and things like that. And that information and that guidance will come out shortly from Geoff and his team. So the main recommendations, and I think the really important thing about this is that although it was a keelboat fatality, actually it's something that we all need to learn from, and we all need to take on board, because although it's very specific to the incident that happened, the lessons learned from it can be applied to all our disciplines. Most of them are around the realms of the kind of training we provide to our staff and volunteers who are working with us. So I thought I'd correct this slide, but it clearly shows that I haven't, and my bullets are all over the place, so apologies for that. So I think it's really important to encourage our centres to seek really regular opportunities to reflect and develop their staff, to refresh skills, and that can be anything. But I think there's a lot of recognition out there that we have people that jump in safety boats and they might only do it once or twice a year on their rota, but equally we've got people that jump in them every day. Both still need refresher training, because even though someone jumps in it every day, they might have got into bad habits. Equally, the person that just does it once or twice a year might be rusty and might need some refresher training as well, because they might need their skills being brought up in different boats, different ways to rescue and things like that. So I think it's actually being mindful and looking at what that centre's delivering, who they're working with, and making sure that they've got the right training in place. That then goes back to their risk assessments and ensuring that the areas that they've pulled out are documented, and it's their standard operating procedures that familiarise the staff with everything that they need to know, and that they aren't a huge, great big file that hasn't been taken on board by their instructors, that the information is relevant and enables them to do their job according to how the centre needs to operate. And it's reflective of what they're trying to do as well. So it's not just a load of words that don't reflect the kind of on-water operation that they've got. It's reflective of what happens on the water. It also then needs to include anything if it changes, so if they bring new equipment in or they change something, change the way that a procedure of doing something, their SOPs need to reflect that, and the staff need to make sure that they're trained in doing that. So there should be some way of logging and documenting all of those changes and all of those procedures that take place. I think also sometimes there's an unawareness of our centres that if they bring a piece of kit in, it's not necessarily one single procedure that goes alongside that piece of equipment, and that equipment behaves in different ways depending on the conditions, and you might have to have different people using the different boat at different times, or you might have to cap a wind strength when a boat's allowed to be used, or perhaps different students are only allowed to use it at certain times if the wind strength is higher. We need to make sure that their ops procedures are reflecting anything that you might feel should be in place for a particular craft, especially if it's more high performance. Maybe not so much with beginner kit, but we are more likely to want to see that kind of thing as we go up with the spec of the equipment that we're using. With this particular incident, it was to do, sorry, I'm just going to apologise because I've got 2 kids that are just running in after being outside, so apologies for any noise in advance. This particular incident was to do with lifting keels and boats being knocked down. And so a very fundamental area of this is the safety side of it. So do they understand and appreciate any safety mechanisms that come with any equipment they've got? And that's not necessarily just boats or keel boats. That could be anything. It could be life jackets, it could be ribs, it could be engines. Are staff effectively trained with any safety mechanisms that are in place, and how they need to do that, what they need to do, the servicing, etc., anything that comes out of that. So the lifting keel side of it and the knockdown was very specific to this fatality, but it is a characteristic that the centre can then take on through their other operations and the equipment that they've got. Rigging, again, in the same essence, are the staff aware of how they should be rigging something? Have they been told how to do it properly? Or is the centre kind of relying on the fact that they are an instructor, and so they should know? So are they relying on the fact that they've done an instructor course in whatever scheme, and then they're not providing any additional training? We want to see that staff training has been put in place, and what they've done, it needs to be documented. And similar, so life jackets versus buoyancy aids. Some of our, for example, some of our sailability centres, they might decide to use one over the other for a specific reason, but is there an active dynamic risk assessment over that? Or if they just decided that maybe a couple of years ago even, and never re-looked at it, never reviewed it, or are they doing it dynamically depending on who that person is and depending on what that activity is? So we're looking for that dynamic approach to ensure that it's appropriate for the activity and the person that's there. So the whole lot really encompasses our reviewing of a robust safety management system, and all of those elements come into that. And as an inspector, we need to start looking, or we should be looking at that and offering advice or pointing them in the direction of where they can get advice, areas they might have missed out, things like that. So to try and help us along with that, I've spent some time looking at the IR1 and reflected on the way that form was set out. And to start with, there were questions on the back of the form asking if something was in place. And when I started to look at that and ask people, there was a lot of ambiguity as to what that question meant to somebody, and it meant something different to every person you asked. So those questions have now been replaced with statements. So, for example, the first statement is the operational procedures are robust and fit for purpose, reflective of how the centre operates and how training is delivered. So it's a statement now, and there is a yes or no answer to that. Or you might therefore provide an action with an appropriate grade on it, A, B, C, or if it's finance in place, then it would be none. And again, those guides that have been revised, the risk assessments and the writing standard operating procedures will also be in the document bank. IR1 and risk assessment should be up by the end of this week. Standard operating procedures is taking just a little bit longer, but all of it should be in place, ready by the time you guys go in to do an inspection. And I would think that would be by the middle of April that all of those documents. Best thing to do is have a look at the date at the bottom, which is the revision date, and you're looking for April 2021 to make sure that you've got the most up-to-date version. So really the other roles, I suppose, that are key to this and the ones that we should be seeing disseminating that information and controlling that information, the two fundamental people in the centre are our principal and our chief instructor. And what they do and how they do it will differ from centre to centre and from club to club, but we should be seeing as we go in that chief instructor is hands-on. And is disseminating that information, listening to their instructors, ensuring the smooth operation of the centre or club, and reviewing those practices on a regular basis. We don't want to see remote or removed chief instructors and principals who aren't managing that, and that's probably where we see things go wrong. Okay. I've kind of covered the rest of it, and I'm going to hand over to Rachel to talk about pre-inspection and some of the areas that take place during our inspection. Are you there, Rach?
I very much am, and I can see we've got about 80 odd people also here with us, maybe eating their tea. Okay, so on we go into the pre-inspection part of it then. And I don't have control yet.
Yeah, you should do. There you go.
There we go. Okay, there we go. We're back in the game. So we should be getting out the allocations from either directly from the RYA, which would be the overseas ones, or from the RDO in early April. As you can see, the cruising inspectors will know, they already know where that they will be doing their inspections. So that will be coming out in a few weeks. What we'd really like you to do is to get in contact with the centre before mid-May to try and get an inspection date in the diary. I've got doodle.com in there because that's something we often speak about. It's a scheduling tool, it's free to use, and if you're trying to do 2 inspections on a day, if you're having to travel to them, then that might be a useful tool for you. If you are struggling to make contact, so if you haven't managed to get hold of the right person, the principal at the centre, by that mid-May time, then please get in contact with recognition, because it might be that something's changed in the background, but certainly we've got a whole database of information where we can try to raise somebody from the centre to see what's going on, and importantly get that inspection started being put together. At that point, in that first communication, it's certainly worth asking the principal if there are any changes to recognition that they're hoping to make. And getting them to submit the change of, well, it could be a change of principal form, or it could be, you know, additional courses and changes to recognition. They need to submit those forms so that actually you know what you're going in to inspect, especially if it's something different. It may be that we need to send someone different in if they're adding a completely new scheme to their suite of offerings. So the best thing you can do beforehand is to make sure that the principal knows they need to complete their part of the IR1 form, the inspection report form, so that that can speed things up on the day. And for you to have a really good look through and just familiarise yourself with that new form. So there's no brand new ideas on there, but as Amanda has already pointed out, they've switched from being questions to statements. So just making sure that you've had a good read through and you know what's on there, so you're not floored or surprised by it on the day. So I guess the question on everyone's mind is whether or not they will be physical or virtual inspections. Well, as you can see from this slide, we're expecting that the UK ones will be mostly physical, unless there's a serious issue and you cannot get to them. So that will be something to discuss directly with training there are certainly some areas of the UK which are more difficult to get to. I'm thinking of maybe the islands, or the Scillies, or the Highlands and Islands, something like that. If you suspect there could be an issue with travelling there, and that might be related to the COVID travel restrictions, please get in contact. From the point of view of ones which are going ahead overseas, we predict they will be all virtual this year, but we will be in contact with the people who are doing those to confirm that situation as we move forwards. So in terms of preparing for an inspection then, one thing we really want you to have a good look at is the website, and get a look at that training notice 3019. It's not very long. It's pretty much that excerpt I've got on the side there is pretty much it, but have a read through in conjunction with looking at that website to make sure that it complies. This is an area that we have got both Michelle and Kirsty looking regularly at websites. So when people, we sometimes get reports of websites which are exceeding instructor-student ratios, or where the RTC name doesn't appear on there, or so we do a fair amount of background checks on ones that we come across, but it massively lightens that load and helps to keep things in check if the inspector does so before going into an inspection, because then you can have that face-to-face conversation with them about what you've seen on the website and how it complies with the with those marketing materials guidelines just there. Have a look on the allocation email to check if you have a secondary site that you need to look at, because of course you do need to go and visit those. And as far as possible, it might well be worth requesting the operation procedures and course programs are sent to you beforehand, so that you can minimize the time you need to spend inside or somewhere, somewhere slightly shaded from the wind, hopefully, reading any kind of paperwork on the actual day. So for some people that will work really well, getting the stuff in advance. For other people, it works better doing it on the day. It's up to you how you do it, but you are absolutely able to ask about that and to get them sent over. So on the day itself then, Amanda mentioned that we're getting positive feedback from our from the inspections that have been happening over the last few years. Excuse me. And that's down to the efforts that you guys are putting into it, making sure that it's a friendly experience and that we are supporting and encouraging centres in the right direction. Things like it might well be that induction training and ongoing training happens, but that it isn't being documented. So just encourage them to get that written down in some way or another, recording who attended, what was covered, maybe the length of the session, that sort of stuff. Just getting down. It could just be in the centre's log. It could be marked down anywhere. But in the event they need to prove that they have an ongoing training regime, then it's obviously easier if they know where they've recorded it. Make sure you take the time to speak to the instructors as well. I always try to find the most junior person I can at a centre, and then I just chat to them about working there, about some different bits and bobs, perhaps some things that I've picked up when I've read the ops docs. And then make sure that you do, as far as possible, get on and watch some actual training happening, so that you can give some feedback to the instructor and to the principal and chief instructor. Make sure you take the time to help with the course plans. That is, this course plan requirement has been a requirement for longer than I've been at the RYA, and this is my 10th year here. So we really shouldn't be seeing this coming up on action plans. So please help them out with it, and bump it up a level if it hasn't been done, because we know there are centres that don't have course plans, and maybe get to the bottom of why, because they're not that difficult to put together. And actually, if you just go through the process with them of making one up for their most popular course, then hopefully they can follow suit and it will be a little bit easier. And take the time to share any ideas you have as well. So when we get there on the day, there's a few things we need to check. We need to look at the procedures and admin. That is a fundamental thing within the within the inspection of understanding how everything hangs together. We need to take a good look at the actual site and the equipment that they're using for the training. And we want to have a look at the operating area so that we can understand the context of the training. So as you're doing so, as you may have read them before you get there, or even if you're reading once you are there, really take a think about the operating procedures that you're reading. They might not be written in a way that you would have written them yourself, but are they, as it says on there, robust and appropriate? Are they covering what needs to be covered so that somebody who's brand new to the centre could read them and understand how, as a dinghy instructor or a powerboat instructor, they slot in and operate within the organisation? Having a chat with those junior members of staff will give that away and let you understand how much they got from reading the docs and how actually the docs were delivered to them. Is it just, here's a massive wedge of paperwork, have a read through that, or is there some kind of meeting where people are brought together and they discuss any changes and run through things? It's interesting to see how that's coming through and also how effective that is. And you also want to know how actually they are using those operating areas, what goes on in each of the areas, and so that you can really understand are there any there's a question about whether or not there are unacceptable hazards within the operating area. Unless we discuss it or have a good look at it, we wouldn't know that. So please do take that time to do so. So the area of operation, this doesn't apply to either cruising or inland waterways, is a maximum of 3 miles from the slipway or marina. This is a slide you'll have seen in various guises over the last few years, but it's really important that we make sure centres are understanding this. They should have, by now, they should have applied for an operating area extension, and they should have had an email back from Recognition agreeing it or not agreeing it. But there should be some kind of proof to show you. If they don't have that, then please action plan them to submit one. And as you can see at the bottom there, it's TG 3219 is where they will find the extension of operating area. The only reason we will extend an operating area, if indeed we're able to, is if the syllabus cannot be covered within 3 miles of the slipway or marina, wherever they're getting on the water. So for some reason they can't. It might be that they are fully in a fully speed limited area. There could be a number of reasons, but those are the kinds of things we'll look at. Just because they want to go to Cowes for an ice cream is not something we'll agree an extension for on a powerboat level 2, for example. So instructor qualifications then. What we're asking you to do here is to see a record of the expiry of first aid and instructor certificates. We certainly don't need you to see the actual copies, and please don't put down any mention of wanting copies sent to you as part of an action plan. If they haven't got that information, then they can send you the expiries of people's of somebody's certificate, but we don't want them sending out ones with people's names and all sorts of data on them back over to you. The important thing is that we should get a good look at the recognition certificate, and whatever qualifications are required to be held for all of those courses must be held within the centre's kind of team of instructors. So that's the stuff we're looking for. So picking out things where there may be an additional requirement, for example, within the racing or advanced powerboat, or it could be inland waterways at a multi-activity centre where they've had it added on. Check out the ones which are different to the run-of-the-mill ones which centres are operating on, to find out if they have got that actual person and they've got a qualified instructor to deliver it. Okay, first aid certificates. Deep breath, we're talking first aid again. Okay, so at the moment we have possibly got, or we might be coming up to having 2/3 of our instructors who are either running on an extension or have expired on their first aid. So that's obviously not a great situation to be in. during the last year, people have been able to take a 1-year extension, which has been an online revalidation done through it's virtual training done with an RTC recognised for first aid, and that has given them that 1 extra year from when they expired. However, we're now coming up to the point where those are running out as well. But we are, so I guess the important thing to note there is that that extension, it will allow somebody to operate as a commercially endorsed boater or as an instructor, but it won't allow the person to be the one who is in overall charge of first aid on site. So we must have an actually fully qualified first aider on site whenever there's training occurring. So because we've come up to that problem there, what we've done is we've made an adjustment to the course. So if they're past 1 year of expiry, then now they can do half the course online, which gives them a 6-month extension from the day they do that course. Or, as you can see in there, 2 years from the original expiry, whichever is the shortest applies. However, having done that kind of update online, they've then got 2 months to get themselves into a classroom to do a half-day practical where we cover things like bandaging and CPR, etc. And then they will gain the new 3-year certificate. So your choices at the moment are either attend a centre and do a 1-day RYA first aid course or any other first aid course, or you can do this if you know that there's a difficulty in getting one local to you. It might be that you do the online update, and then within 2 months you follow that through with a half-day practical, so that you are back up and running with a full new 3-year certificate. There is no reason at the moment that first aid courses can't go ahead, because first aid courses are vocational and they are a requirement of both instructors and people with commercial endorsements. So anything that is required for an instructor course and is being done because of either wanting to do an instructor course or needing to maintain a qualification as an instructor can be delivered. So centres could well be starting to deliver this. I'm just not so sure that many have noted that and moved forward with it. So I think that the situation will start to alleviate soon. But certainly centres really need to start to focus in on this first aid situation, because it is a little bit of a ticking time bomb. If people do nothing about it and sit in their laurels, we're going to end up with entire centres that don't have a fully qualified first aider, especially the many clubs that will bring a first aid instructor to the club and deliver to all of their instructors. Well, they're all going to run out on the same day, aren't they? So this is definitely a conversation we need to be having, and it's possibly even worth teeing up with them during that initial email for contact, just reminding them of that they need to ensure they've got their first aiders up and running. Okay, on to SRC then. This is a 5-yearly one, and you'll be told within your allocation letter if you are expected to do an SRC inspection. Please only do it if you have been asked to, because that's the only time we're going to pay you. You know, you can do it for your health if you want to, but I don't think the centre will appreciate it. So if you haven't been trained to do it, and I think most people have, but if you haven't, then let your RDO know, or let RYA training know if you're not doing English regions, and then we can put some more training on and bring you up to speed for that. So on to the paperwork side of things then. You should all recognise those bits of paper. So as I mentioned before, it's really important to get a look at that RTC recognition certificate. In many of our small boat centres, they are proudly displayed on the wall of either the office or the entrance hall. There's lots of these. I see them all over the place. Perhaps if we're doing a cruising inspection, that might not be so obvious because it's probably tucked away in a file at the principal's abode. So hopefully we ask them to bring that along, or you could ask them to send you a copy of it. The report form, the IR1 form, is an editable PDF. So it's up to you if you or the centre wants to print it out and write on it, or whether you want to fill it out via one device or another. The only issue we know that comes up is to do with the signatures. So it could well be that having had it signed by the principal, that you then will need to print it out in order that you can put your own signature on it. We can't get around that at the moment, but we are working on it. The vessel checklist, really good idea to highlight these to the centre in that first initial email, just so that they know exactly what it is we're looking at. Just a little reminder, it does only happen once a year for those guys, so so that they can be prepared and they know exactly what it is that we're going to be looking for. When you've completed it, please leave the vessel checklist with the centre. They are just, there's nothing we do with them when they come to RYA House except put them in the bin. But if we leave them with the centre, any items that you've mentioned on the action plan, they can refer straight back to the checklist, and they're able then to know exactly the detail that we're talking about when we said so and so was missing. So this is the form I was mentioning earlier, that right at the start, tee it up with them and say, are there any details that have changed? If so, let's get those sorted before the inspection. But it could be that in between then and you actually doing the inspection, that something has changed. So just make sure that you're pointing them towards the change of principal form or the change of recognition form, so that we can get those critical pieces of information sorted and onto the RYA database. So we get you to do inspections because of your expertise. You absolutely know what a good centre looks like, and I'm sure you know what one that's not so great looks like also. But what we want you to do when you're doing that inspection is to take a good look at the entire operation, having read the documents, having spoken to instructors, having looked at the equipment and noted the operating area. You're trying to answer the questions there. Is it overall a safe operation? And is the quality of teaching and learning in line with what we'd expect at an RYA training centre? As I mentioned before, whether or not the operating procedures document is exactly how you would have written it is a different question as to whether or not it meets the minimum standards for the conditions of recognition. So you're just trying to get an overall good feel for that. And then I want you to set some smart actions. So as we head over into the I'd like you to head over into the questions box and tell me what the S for SMART stands for, please. Quickest, I think that was Becky was the quickest there. Okay, can I have the M, please? I think some people are still finding their keyboards. Perfect. Specific, measurable. A. Achievable. Steve Barrowman, quick off the mark there. Thank you. R. Oh, I didn't catch that, was so quick. Whoever got the realistic one straight up, well done. And then finally T. Absolutely time-based. So we've got specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based actions. So we want to make sure that that's what we're setting so that they know exactly what it is they've got to do to move on. So thinking about action plans then, I'm just going to pop up a little poll here. And the question is, what are the most common issues you find on an inspection? If you could just have a little vote there, please. Okay, so 22% are saying qualifications, 44% inadequate administration. "30 seconds for the final 30% to vote. Those people that have gone for a cup of tea, more fool you. Okay, what's singing out to me on here is inadequate administration. And I am heartened to see that only 2% are saying the quality of on-water delivery. Oh, where are those other 14%? Who's hiked out of the room pretending that they're here? 13%, one person. Oh, it's going up. We're nearly there. Okay. I'm going to close that now, and hopefully I can share those results with you. There we go. So that is pretty interesting, isn't it? That the majority of it is inadequate administration. So that gives us a focus for this year, doesn't it? That's the sort of thing we need to be focusing in on. If we're all saying, or almost half of the inspectors on here are saying that administration's the issue, let's do a big hit on that one, please. Okay. Thank you for that. So action plans then. You've seen this all before, the A actions, the B actions and the C actions. So in the questions, once again, can you give me an example of an A action, please? Out of date flares, kill cord usage. Yep, those are good ones. Safety specific, things that are unsafe. Great, thank you. What about B actions? What sort of things might come up there? Things they've got 3 months to do. Fuel stored in a sail saw, not in a box. Lack of kit. Operating procedures, staff training records. So yeah, it's things that are important but are not going to make training unsafe on the day. So it's generally not about the actual equipment. And then C, what else? What are we going to need to do there on a C action that we're confident they can do while we are, you know, over the year? Improvements, logging training, yep. So they must have started stuff. Updating course plans, probably if it's update course plans, yes. If it is make course plans, that would be at least a B. Okie dokes, thanks very much for those guys. So I think we've got a fairly good idea there. Do make sure when you are completing the action plan that you give us the RGN reference so that the centre knows exactly what it is that we are, where to find the detail about the action that they need to complete, and also the grade. Just be mindful of the descriptions of those grades, the fact that an A is immediate action required and that it could stop training. So if it's, I don't know, maybe it's a powerboat with lacking a second kill cord, hopefully they'll get that straight away. They'll probably do that while you're there. It could be bits that are broken or things that people could get injured on. Those need sorting immediately. If they've only got one of those within the fleet, then that's going to stop that part of their recognition until they can sort that. So just make sure that we are grading those. Have a good think about the grades as you put them up, please. Once you have got action plan evidence and things that you're asking them to evidence back to you, please make sure that they that does come back to you, and that when you are satisfied they've completed it, that you email RYA recognition and let them know. When you do let them know, please, this is a huge plea from the guys who get 200 emails a day, please put the RTC name and action plan complete in the email title with whatever other detail you're putting into the email, so that they can, it helps them with their sorting and can make their day just that little bit easier. That would be most appreciated. So your final paperwork checks then. Make a note on the action plan about last year's actions, whether or not they were complete. And if they weren't complete, please make sure that you escalate them up a grade so that then they are they're followed up more rigorously to ensure that that actually occurs. Check whether the RTC name that and the principal's name that they're putting onto the inspection report form also match the recognition certificate. And if they don't, you know what we're going to say. You need to give us those forms. We need the change of principal or change of recognition forms to come in with it. Please make sure that you ring the courses that it's been inspected for. And if there are any removals or additions to what is displayed on the certificate, please write that on the action plan. Don't just leave it to our guys to play spot the difference between what it says on the database and how many rings you've managed to draw. It really is critical that we get this information correct. So any changes, additions or removals, write them on the action plan as a note to training. Ensure you get the signatures, both yours and theirs, and most importantly, your vendor number. Otherwise, it slows down getting paid. Okay, I think I'm handing back over to Amanda at this point.
You are, yeah. Thank you very much for that, Rach.
No worries.
I hope that was of interest and kind of a refresher for everybody to go through some of those areas, especially some of the areas that have kind of changed or have been adapted because of the last 12 months. So obviously we're going to share these slides, but also probably what's really important, if I can actually get the slides to work again, is where you can find that advice, or where you can pinpoint other people to find that advice. And I suppose one thing that we want to make sure everyone is aware of is that we don't hear what the government are going to say or what they're going to do any earlier than anyone else does. So those announcements that Boris makes that get sieved through the BBC News, that's effectively the first time any of us hear about that. It then gets delayed because we then have to wait for Sport England and the DCMS, the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, to interpret what the government have told them and decide what that means to a governing body like the RYA. So initially we were receiving that information fairly quickly, within a week or so of the government making the announcement. The recent one, with the changes that took place yesterday, so the 29th, it probably took Sport England and the DCMS it took them about 2 weeks to come back to us and decide what that interpretation meant and whether RYA training and instructor training could take place. So I think if you do go into centres while we are still easing out of this lockdown, it's really just to rest them assured that we are doing as much as we possibly can, and the best place for them to get their updates are the RYA website and the training support site, and that as soon as we have updated information, that's where it goes. We don't know anything any sooner, and sometimes it is really frustrating. It's frustrating for us, it's frustrating for you, and it's frustrating for the centres. But we aren't holding back information. As soon as we get it and it's interpreted, we let you know. Some other areas to look at are the RYA club guidance, and there's some frequently asked questions on there. But the majority of places, well, all of the places that you'll be going into are training centres, and the training support site's the best place for them to go. If they think that they are potentially exempt from some of the areas, for example, the recent one, any centres or clubs that had an affiliation with a school were able to continue provision of education earlier than the 29th. That's not something we're really able to push and to advertise because it's not relevant to all our centres. It could have become very confusing if we'd started to advertise some of that information. So when there is an exemption in place, which the government has authorised, the best place for people to get that information and work out as a centre whether they are able to do it is either the government website or the DCMS, and they then need to interpret that guidance themselves. But that kind of goes outside what RYA training are able to provide. We can chat it through, but we wouldn't be able to approve or disapprove anything. It's how that centre's set up and what they're working. So there are some exemptions out there. It's probably not for you to start providing advice on, and it's probably best that if it's outside of RYA training and it's things like education, that they go to the government website to get the clarification. Another area that I just wanted to make you aware of is the new RYA website. It should have been in place, I think it was at the beginning of March, the tail end of February, beginning of March, but we've had some issues with it due to the sheer volume of what the RYA website needs to do and all the complexities with things like the RYA shop and the online, registration areas and things like that. So the digital transformation has been postponed, and I think a new launch date is around May time, hopefully, but that's only if everything is in place. What does that mean to you? It probably means that when you go onto our website for a period of time, most likely over a weekend, perhaps on the Friday you will see the old website, on a Monday you're going to see a new website. We hope by the time it launches, obviously there will be a transitional period of a few days, but you'll be able to access all the material you need to access. There will still be a training support site. I think it will be named slightly differently, but all the links that you've got, all the go-to links, they will still work and you'll be able to access the information. But if you are going into a centre, especially if it's a new centre, it might just be worth letting them know that that transition is taking place. And that they are likely to see a difference over a period of time, but just to bear with us while that's taking place. Another area that is really good to notify the centres is the CPD hub. This area is being used by Becky more and more. Over the last 12 months, we've spent a lot of time looking at the resources on there. The webinars that we pushed out last year are on there and available for people to download and to watch. And really, this is a place that we want people to start feeding back to us as to what they'd like to see and what they want us to start putting in there. So any feedback you get from centres when you go in, make sure they're aware of it. That is for us, it's for inspectors, it's for trainers, it's for instructors. So it's got to be right. So any feedback as to what they would like to see and what they'd like us to cover would be fantastic. So please do keep promoting that area and let's enhance it to the best that we possibly can. A consideration I'm having at the moment is whether we reflect the changes we made back in about 2018, 2019 to the windsurfing scheme, where we changed the minimum course duration to be the practical hours on water over course duration. So we moved away from the 16 hours, 2 days, and we reflected back to provide flexibility and delivery with instructor ratios kind of playing that part. So if you had small groups on the water, we recognised that it could potentially take less time to teach those people because it's smaller groups, but larger groups would still take the same amount of time. So we changed those ratios to reflect on water time rather than the whole course time, which would then incorporate getting changed, taking breaks, having lunch, things like that. That's received some really good feedback and has led me to consider doing the same for sailing, single-handers only, and again reflecting in that smaller ratio of 1:1 and small groups up to a maximum ratio of 1:3. So we're currently considering, and we've done a survey with our centres as to whether we take that approach of windsurfing and we look at providing that flexibility for delivery and having 1:1 and small groups for single-handers, doing the minimum on-water practical tuition hours over the 16 hours and 2 days. There's probably about 75–80% support to go in this direction. So if you do have any feedback, if you didn't complete the survey and you want to provide me with some thoughts of how you think that might impact, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, please let us know. I think as we go through 2021, this might be an area that will help our centres, especially if they look to have smaller groups of people come through their centres rather than filling courses. Potentially it might make it a bit more viable if they're having smaller groups in and they're able to change the way they advertise or the way they're able to structure courses. But if you've got some feedback, it'd be great to hear from you, and we're looking over the next couple of weeks to either adopt it and pilot it for 2021 or not and leave it as the 16 hours and 2 days, but we'll make sure everyone's aware of that. But any feedback would be gratefully received. Another area that I'm sure you're now aware of, we've spoken about it at the national conference and also at the Instructor Training Day, is foiling. The UK are the second highest in foiling participation globally, which is quite interesting and a statistic I never even comprehended we would be. Obviously, when you look out on local waters, especially if you're in a coastal area, the amount of people foiling is incredible. The amount of people windsurf foiling, sail foiling, it is just unbelievable, especially when we were finally allowed back on the water. It was interesting to watch how many people took to sports like that when they weren't able to travel. So then in 2018, we did introduce the foiling courses for the windsurfing and the sailing for our training centres to deliver. And technology keeps advancing, and it is accessible. I've been knocked several times for using the word accessible, but it is bringing foiling into the hands of people that would never ever have felt that they would have been able to do it. It's a concept that you know, not only 10 years ago people would not have thought would have been something that they would have been able to give a go. And now we're seeing people kite surfing, windsurf foiling, wing foiling, and sail foiling. So it is becoming more and more accessible. It is expensive still, but developments are reducing the cost of it, and it is becoming something that a lot more people have the ability to try. Taking the foiling courses to our training centres hopefully has increased the ability for people to give it a go. So what's in the future for us? We've been asked to investigate a route to promote foiling as a whole at the RYA. What does that mean? It means that I suppose we can integrate all the work we've done, and we can provide more guidance as to how to deliver it safely. Instead of it being underneath an individual scheme, we can promote it as a concept, and we can help people deliver it safely as a concept. It's still going to fall under different schemes, but we will start to look at how we might promote that as an overarching idea and an overarching delivery. For us, that also means that we will continue looking and investigating the new concepts that come in and the new developments. So for me, that's wing foiling and wing surfing, and also for Rach, it's going to be the e-foiling side of stuff and the powered craft that might look at the foiling side of things. I think mainly, as I've said, it's about how Rachel and I can adopt those developments and promote the safety side of it. So the operational, us inspecting it and us providing a teaching method that ensures it's done safely within an RYA environment. Not all sports will be able to be taken on by the RYA, but we will look at them as they come in, and having an umbrella model kind of enables us to do that and change the way that we work, not necessarily having the same structure as we have with windsurfing, sailing, powerboating, and all the sports we look after at the moment, all the activities. So for 2021, I think I'm excited. I know it's been a lot of hard work. The RYA will be introducing windsurfing and wing foiling. Windsurfing is effectively the non-foiling side of flying a wing. So that's when somebody does it on a stand-up paddleboard or on a large windsurf board. Probably really attractive to the people that have already bought stand-up paddleboards, the families who have invested in inflatable boards and things like that, and maybe don't see windsurfing and sailing as accessible. This might be an option for them to do. And then obviously the next step up, learning to do it with a foil. We're going to launch it soon, probably in the next month or so, and instructor training opportunities. The first one will be a pilot course we'll run in May, which is the 25th to the 28th of May at OTC in Weymouth. So if you are interested, or if you think a centre might be interested, then let us know. And centre recognition and the course syllabus will obviously follow on with that, with centres being able to deliver the courses. Much the same as the way I introduced and integrated the foiling courses within the windsurfing scheme and the sailing scheme. We will have a pilot year. I think it's fundamental to have a pilot year. We need to be able to advise centres and guide them through it. But also the kit's changing so rapidly that we need to make sure that our scheme reflects those changes and that we adapt to what's going on, so that we can then make sure when we launch the scheme properly, and it doesn't look much different, to be honest, from a pilot scheme to when it's integrated, but 2022 hopefully then we'll have adopted any changes we need to due to trialling instructor courses and things like that. So if there's any interest out there from any of the centres that you visit, if they ask you about it, then please just tell them to pop Molly or I an email. And obviously if there's any trainers out there looking to be involved, then please pop us an email with interest if you want to be involved in the integration of it. And I am going to hand over to Vaughan, if he's still with us.
And I'm here, yes. I get trusted with 1.5 slides we worked out today. So I was going to talk about virtual inspections just very briefly, and that we'd managed to do quite a few last year, not as many as we'd like, but quite a lot. And what's quite interesting is that looking at the websites and all the ops docs, etc., was looking at the action plans was significantly better than previous years. So well done, and keep that up. That's pretty obvious to see looking at the feedback. Bits and pieces of my slide then. So looking at the right hand side is the Yachtmaster Scheme Instructors pre-course material. So there is now, for anyone who's going to do a Yachtmaster instructor course or a Yachtmaster instructor or cruising instructor revalidation, some pre-course material. We talked about building it for years, to be fair, and COVID and all the rest of the pieces that went with that means we probably need to get on with it. So it's probably, I would say, at least half a day's work. The reason I'm telling you all this is so that you can let centres know. It's probably half a day's work to go through it, I would think. There's a lot of looking at me talking on a video. I apologise for that. There's also quite a lot of knowledge shared. There are some confirmation of understanding type questions, but the radar knowledge is purely about sharing information and what you should know, rather than testing you to find out what you do know. So just so you're able to share that with people. And then other bits and pieces while you're looking at the website, we've still got the exemption in place, which means that people can day sail from the home base rather than doing a cruising course. If they feel they want to do a cruising course and it's COVID safe, then obviously they can do that, but it gives them the option to make it slightly better for COVID. And also day skipper and coastal skipper courses can be combined. I don't plan that to last forever, but it just means again that because less customers are coming, schools can work around the fact that they've got less, and if they've got someone that wants to do coastal and day at the same time, they can work that out. It's a bit of a challenge to run, to be honest, talking to people that have tried, but it is a possibility. There's also another bit on revalidation is we are aware, and obviously with us talking about the fact that all or pretty much all inspections abroad will be virtual, we had to try and do something to help the instructors abroad that can't come to a revalidation. So we've built, well, we haven't built, we've got a Zoom call plan, which effectively means that a revalidation for somebody who can't get to a real, as we would call it, on the boat revalidation means they do the pre-learning, which is the right hand side of the slide still. And then as part of when they book on the course, they also select a theory lesson to teach, and then they'll teach that online with one of the trainers. So it'll still be 4 people. There'll still be the opportunity to chat about pre-learning and any other things that are on your mind or on their mind as the people revalidating. But it just means that we've got a little bit of assistance for instructors rather than just sticking them right by another year and revalidating them without actually seeing them. So it's the best we can do, but it will be 2 years from when their current certificate is due or was due to run out. So that's one thing just to point out to people. And if in doubt and you don't understand any of that, then please give me a ring or get them to give me a ring and I'll have a chat to them.
I think that's all. So thank you very much from me for joining us this evening. We really appreciate you taking the time out. We will make the recording available if you'd like to watch it again. But most importantly, the slides will be there as well if you want any of the links that we've mentioned throughout the evening. And I'll hand over to Rach and Vaughan and Robbie to see if they've got anything else to add.
Sun's shining. I'm pretty chuffed with that.
Robbie, anything from you?
No, nothing from me, thank you.
And Vaughan?
Nothing from me ever, thank you.
No. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.